Today we're interviewing Chris Crysdale of Skier's Choice. That is the mothership that runs Supra and Moomba brand in marine space. Chris takes us through his history in the marine industry and gives us a really good peek behind the curtains of what it is all about at Supra and Moomba. Really good interview, very thorough, and a really good guy to listen to. Enjoy this episode of GarageCast. This is a show for anybody that has something that they want to say. It's going to be full of people with a lot of energy, CEOs, OEMs, vendors.
Best practice ideas in this industry and of neighboring industries.
We're talking to people that are on the cutting edge of processes, management.
Serial entrepreneurs, authors. We really have a feast of all different types of senior level people.
A cornucopia, as it were.
A plethora, maybe. Grab a pen, grab a cup of coffee, and have a seat. Start writing. This is GarageCast.
GarageCast. Dude, this is number two or three today, or I know
something like that.
Week.
Yeah, before everybody gets crazy and dealer shows happen and 20 clubs happen and all that, we're trying to stack a few up. So yeah.
Today we're talking. Yeah, today we're talking to the catch-all drawer, the jack of all trades, for Skier's Choice, Chris Crysdale. And here's the cool thing: he just told us off air that today's his last day of the week. He's going to take a little time for himself. Going to take a little 5-day staycation, and I like this guy already, man. He said he's going to be floating on a boat drinking beer for 5 days, and that sounds pretty damn awesome to me. Yeah?
That's what I do best.
Yeah. Well, I like him. I think it goes hand in hand with his title, right? His title, which is, I don't know what my title is.
I don't know.
I don't know. You call me whatever you want. It reminds me, my first business card when I started with Ed Lemko in 2000, it said Sam Dansler Jackass. It's my favorite card. I still have it. It's my favorite card ever. So Jackass and drinking beer in a boat, all those go together.
There you go.
Right on, Chris. Hey, thanks for taking the time. Hopefully this is it, man. Hopefully you do this interview and you just peace out from here and go enjoy yourself on your body of water, man.
That's it. I'm planning on wearing myself out over the next hour or so I'll be anxious to get out of here.
All right. Well, cool. Well, take a minute and tell us about your history and journey in the marine space and how you ultimately found yourself at Skier's Choice.
You bet. Gosh, my journey's probably a weird one. Obviously very fortunate to be in the marine industry and doing what I do. I sometimes pinch myself and think, gosh, I make a pretty good living selling expensive things that people really don't need. How did I get here? And obviously met a lot of great people along the way. My journey is more of chance encounters and people I met along the way, some very specific people. And I think you know two of them. I'll mention their names here in a minute, but I actually started out as a Ford mechanic. I went to a Ford training school and worked on cars, and I was a very introverted person, didn't like talking to people, but I loved working on cars. So I thought that was a perfect job for me. But I grew up boating, and was on the water, loved the water. My last, I think it was 2 or 3 years of high school, we lived in East Texas on Lake Athens, and my dad bought this little center console 50-horse Merc boat, and I thought I was the coolest person on the lake, and we were out in it all the time. And so just had this affinity for the water. So I got married very young, actually married my high school sweetheart, still married. We'll be 35 years this year, but I wanted to get a boat almost as soon as we got married. And she, of course, didn't think that was a great idea. I wanted to get a direct drive boat. And we ended up getting this little 17-foot VIP 4-cylinder. And she quickly, we all outgrew that boat basically. So I talked her into finally, my dream boat was a ProStar 190, wasn't, this is the early 90s, I guess. So we decided we were going to buy a used boat, and I had actually been sick for about a week, and I don't get sick very often, but when I do, I'm a typical guy. I go down hard and make a big deal out of it. And, we woke up Saturday morning after I'd missed a whole week of work, and I still didn't feel great, but I said, hey, I need to get out of the house and do something. I'm tired of being in the house. So we decided we'd go look at used boats. And we went to this place called Water Ski America in Dallas, Texas, and that's where I'm from. And we walk in there, and it was right when they opened, and you talk about a chance encounter. So we walk up to this guy, and it was a gentleman named Tim Savar, who's still a good friend of mine. And it was his very first day of work. He was a Budweiser sales rep from Colorado, and he his buddy was taking over this dealership. So Tim came down to sell boats. We were the very first people he ever talked to, my wife and I. He was the first person we talked to about a used boat, and we just kind of hit it off. And we ended up not buying a boat from him, but we bought a used ProStar 190 from another dealer. But we ended up becoming friends, and we would hang out. We'd party together, whatever. But we boated a lot together, and they were the Malibu dealer. And so they started bringing that was like, I want to say it was probably about 91 or 92. And they brought the Malibu Echelon. That was when it first came out. And it was such a different boat that we started skiing with them. And I'm thinking, I have my dream boat, but this is a better boat. So I got all excited about this boat. We ended up buying one. And for a period there, I actually I broke my foot, and I owned a Malibu Echelon and a ProStar 190. I couldn't ski behind either of them. But ended up just fell in love with the product, and I just started helping them. It was kind of a natural thing. I helped them at boat shows, doing demos, dealer events. And it was funny, the first boat show I ever worked, my parents actually came to the boat show from East Texas. It was in Fort Worth, was a show, because they didn't believe I'd actually go up and talk to people. I was not a salesperson by any means, but I was telling my story, and I still do that to this day. I love to tell stories, even when I'm selling product. And so I would tell my story and help them sell a lot of boats. And then Tim ended up buying the dealership from his buddy and needed to hire a salesman. So he could have hired me, or there was another local guy who'd been in the business a long time. So he took a chance on me, and we ended up, it was very successful. I worked there, I think it was about 6 or 7 years, was actually the 5 times National Salesman of the Year for Malibu, which if you knew me before boats, you would know that you'd be shocked that I did that. But just love selling the product, truly believed in the product. And along the way became friends with, and I'm sure you know this guy, Paul Singer.
Sure.
And so Paul's still, I consider him a great friend, but he was I think it was VP of sales and marketing at Malibu at that time. And he had worked our shows, and just, we did events together, and he'd call me and I'd call him. We just became friends. So the opportunity came up to be South Central sales rep for them. So I took that job and covered Texas and the surrounding states. And then after a few years of doing that, he asked me if I wanted to be national sales manager. And I said, absolutely. And then he said, but you have to move to Merced, California. And I said, hell no, there's no way I'm going to. So, and no offense to my Merced friends, but I was not going to move my family from Dallas, Texas to Merced, California. Then we figured out a few months later how it could work, me working from home. So did that. Great time at Malibu. But as the years went on, there were some changes. I'll just kind of leave it at that. And I knew it was my time to do something different. Didn't know what I was going to do. Could never imagine I would work for another inboard boat manufacturer. And Paul actually got me hooked up with the Taiga guys, and they had called him, and he recommended me to them. And so they called me, and at first I was not too excited, but then I thought, well, Abilene's not far away, so I'll go check it out and see. And I ended up working for them for about 2 years, but they were pressuring me to move to Abilene, which Abilene is kind of like the Merced of Texas. And I was thinking, not moving from Dallas to there either. Yeah. I'd say it to their faces. They know it. So, So oddly enough, I was in Seattle at the Seattle Boat Show, and another good friend of mine, Amy Mozzie, who I know you guys know, we had both worked at Malibu together for years, and we actually both quit the same week. She came to Skier's Choice, and I went to Taiga, and so we were having breakfast before the Seattle show, and we were just kind of catching up, and I explained to her that, Taiga was trying to get me to move to Abilene, and I wasn't real hip about that, so I just really wasn't sure what I was going to do. Never thought anything of it. And about 3 weeks later, I get this random text from Amy, and she basically, if I remember the exact words, it was, "Hey, jackass, I know you don't want to move to Abilene, but would you want to move to Knoxville?" And I'm thinking, what the hell is this? So I called her up.
That's what that is.
Yeah, exactly.
That's Amy.
I can tell you some Amy stories. We've had some fun together. And so anyway, I ended up coming. I was going to be in Knoxville. I think it was 3 or 4 weeks from that text, and so I came in, met with ownership here, hit it off well, and that was 11 years ago. Moved my family here. They love it here. I love it here. Again, I still wonder what I'm doing in this industry. And I still look back and I think of that one, you have that chance meeting in your life. And had I not gotten up and gone to Water Ski America that morning and met Tim, I don't know that I'd probably still be in the car business. That's what all my family does. So yeah, sorry, that's a little bit of a long story, but
that's all right.
That's
from the master storyteller.
Yeah.
So skier's choice, right? And I want you in this answer, tell us what models they carry for our listeners, because we have a lot of non-marine people who listen to this. Skier's choice, small, privately held company out of Tennessee. Why is that so unique? What does that mean for the employees, the end user, the new products, the software update, right? What does all of that translate to?
You bet. So yeah, a little bit about us, and one of the reasons I love it here. For those that don't know, Skier's Choice, because a lot of people say, "Who the heck is Skier's Choice?" They don't have a clue who that is. That is our parent company name is Skier's Choice, and we build Supra boats and Moomba boats, and that's all we do. Supra and Moomba boats. We're a small company, relative to what else is out there in the marine industry, but it's a very unique company. And when I say that, it's unique by the way we do business. I think it's different from everybody else. We don't chase market share and we don't chase growth. And I know that sounds really weird. And I think there's advantages and disadvantages to that. And to be honest with you, I had to reprogram myself when I came here because, I was used to Malibu, who was, we want to be number one. That's what we were pushing for every day. Then I went to Taiga, who just wanted growth. My job there was to go out and sign dealers and get orders so we could build boats. And then I come here and it's like hitting the brakes. It's a different way of doing business. Our sales reps aren't commission based. The focus here is quality. And that's a big thing for me personally, because I was typically the one dealing with dealers face to face, and when I tell somebody it's quality, I want to be able to look them in the eye and say, hey, this is a quality product and we're going to stand behind it. And, we limit our production. We don't chase the market. For a long time, we've turned away orders, at the end of the year. So it's a different way of doing business. And again, there's also a negative side to that, which I'll touch on too, but we're able to react quickly. So we've got a single ownership group. They're here every day. I can get up right now and walk down the hall and ask a question or whatever. I'm not having to go and, do a presentation or talk to somebody that's not here or whatever. So our focus is different than most manufacturers. We do a lot of things really well. It's true lean manufacturing here. And, I used to think of lean manufacturing was just, you lay a bunch of people off and everybody works twice as hard and ownership makes more money and there you go. But I learned coming here that, there's processes and there's quality control and safety and doing it right the first time and cleanliness and organization. I mean, you walk through our factory and it's clean. It's super clean and everything's organized. We've won the CSI award the last 20 years in a row with both brands, and that's a unique thing. I mean, that says a lot about our focus, not just as a manufacturer, but also our dealer network. But what we do different is most manufacturers would take those CSI awards and they put them at their main entrance where the customers come in, or people are vendors or customers, whatever, coming in. We actually put all those, we have no awards there. All our awards are at our employee entrance. So every morning when our employees come in and every day when they leave, they're walking by those awards as a reminder of this is what we do. This is why we're here every day, is to build a quality boat. So it's a different focus, and then even our employees, we're in the mecca of boat building. We're in right outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, and there's probably 10 to 12 boat manufacturers, some pretty big players, and then some smaller companies. There's also Denso, that's the second largest manufacturer of automotive parts, is right on the same street as us. I look out my window at them. So there's huge employment opportunities for anybody in production. So it's very important that we keep our quality people. We still have turnover, but not as much as a lot of companies, because this company truly does care about their employees. When I first came here, I remember at the end of the first model year, I think I started here in April, and then we're starting a new model year, but we're finishing up the schedule and we're turning away orders. And so I went to ownership and I'm like, why don't we work Saturdays, or even Sundays and build some more boats and get more boats out there? And they quickly walked me out to the production line and said, you see these 200 plus people, they've got husbands, wives, soccer games, softball games, t-ball, whatever. They need a quality of life. And if we don't give them a quality of life, we will lose them to, there's so many different manufacturers here. So I still didn't I'm still like, I was that competitive go guy. So it took me a while to get used to that, but we've even lost employees to other manufacturers when, we were a 5-day work week. Now we're a 4-day work week. We have adjusted that, but they'd go to other they leave us at 5 days a week to go to a 4-day a week company and end up working 6 days a week, because those companies were pushing for more. So they'd end up coming back. So, the quality of life is here. You're not just a number. We've had very minimal layoffs. We even when we went down in production, when things slowed down, we tried not to lay anybody off. In fact, there were times we had too many employees, and but when we ended up through attrition. Basically, as people would leave, we just wouldn't replace them because you always have turnover until we got to the right number where we needed to be. We even went through a stage where we could only guarantee our employees a 36-hour work week. And, we were about to lose some good people because they needed that 40-hour work week, because that adds up, over the month. So we actually put together a policy. We did it. There were some criteria they had to meet as far as quality control and ways we measure that. But if they met that, we would pay them for a 40-hour work week. So, the ownership took that upon themselves, which I'm not even sure how many, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars was spent just to keep good employees so they wouldn't leave and go somewhere else. So it's a different way, I think, in today's world than most companies, where you're not just a number, and it's not just, well, screw it. If they can't live off 36 hours and they can go somewhere else, it's like, no, these are good people. How do we take care of them? And that's how we get treated here. And I think that says a lot about our company. We're a very humble company. We don't beat our chest a lot. We don't, we probably should. We talk about it here, but we kind of do that fly under the radar. We're really good at what we do. I'll argue we build some of the best boats on the market. And I'll argue this is a great place to work, but we just a lot of people don't notice it. We just kind of fly under that radar because we don't stand up and beat our chest. I mean, we do a lot of charity work. In fact, right before this, I was voting. We're doing an open house September 6th for all our employees. We're going to have a dunk booth, and we had to vote on who's going to be there. But there's a cost for throwing balls at it. And that's all going to go to charity. We do, Habitat for Humanity and Toys for Tots, but nobody knows it. We do it as a company to do good things for the community, but we don't use it as a reason to put our name out in front of people, if that makes sense.
It does, Chris. And let me jump in here, because one of the guys who brought you to me, you and Dan Miller, back, I don't know what it was, 3 or 4 years ago now, at the MRAA show, was Todd Solberg. And it was Todd up, and he's singing. He's literally, not verbatim, obviously, but he's talking about the integrity of your company. And we were talking about maybe doing a 20 club together, and he said, "I'm going to introduce you to these guys, but understand they're not chasing market share, right? That's not what they're doing. But the premiumness of what you do and the quality control is evident, and it was pouring out of Todd when you and I first met."
You bet. That's awesome to hear. Yeah. I mean, we want to be a great partner too. We're again, I'll argue I've been in this business a long time, and our product, even our competitors will tell you how good our product is. I mean, we do a lot of things right. But we're also a good partner to our dealers. We're not the company that says, hey, if you don't take 10 more boats this year, we're going to find somebody else that'll do it. We sit down with them and go, what's real? What can you do? And let's work with that number. We have dealers that come to us, new dealers, and they say, hey, I want to be a dealer for you. I think we can do, 30 boats a year in this market. And you look at that market and go, man, you're going to be lucky to do 10. So let's start at 8, or 6 or whatever, and be realistic, and let's grow together. And that's kind of the way we do things. And I think at the end of the day, you'd ask about the end user. And I think that's where we benefit the end user, is our focus on quality, our strength as a company, the way we do business, our partnership with our dealers. We're a very transparent company too. We're easy to get a hold of. You can call here and speak to the president of the company, and customers do it. And I get all we have various, SC info and Moomba info. Anybody that clicks on a website link, they can send us an email. There's a careers one. Those all come to me, and then I disperse them around the company. But I dispersed one to our head of engineering the other day just to get his opinion, and he responded directly to the customer, and said, "Hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm head of engineering here. Here's, let me help you with this. Let me give you this information." It's like, that doesn't happen very much at a company.
Yeah. Speaking of engineering and boats out there, it appears that every player in the towboat / surfboat space has both a premium and a value brand right now as well. With value models now, 6 figures, we're talking mortgages on boats. Does that business strategy still work as designed, Chris?
Yes, but no, and no, but yes. If that makes any sense.
The sales guy who got 5 years in a row of number one sales guy.
Let me spin this how it makes it sound good. Yes. There is I believe there is a market for the $100,000 boat, but to your point, it's different than what it used to be. I don't know so much the first time buyer. It's a very it's a hot topic here at our factory, and how do we, quit leaving that person behind? But where I think now, at least for us as a manufacturer, and I'm going to speak very specifically about Moomba, not just all value boats, but Moomba is an OG, if you will. It's the original, value price boat, and it was. We've got an old ad hanging in our marketing room, and it's they did an awesome ad years ago, and they kind of blurred it out, but it was a high-end premium boat, and from an overhead view, and then there's a view of a Moomba behind a truck, and it's like you can get both of these for the price of this, and that was kind of where Moomba fell. But now, Moomba is it's a quality boat. We build them on the same line as Supra, same gel coat, same resin, same material. So I think what I guess the direction I'm heading is that it's a great value, but with great quality, and I think this is where that value price boat is going to start impacting the market or seeing it, if you will. It's like it's a smart buy, I guess, if you will. That's the way I kind of like to refer to it. And it's, I get people, and I say this kind of with tongue in cheek, if you will, but I'll be at a boat show and somebody will come in and say, "Hey, I'm looking at a brand Y, so it's a 23 footer. Show me what you have in a Supra." And I'll look at them and I'll go, "Hey," and again, you got to be careful because you don't want to insult people, but I like to use humor when I'm talking to people. I'm like, "Hey, I get what you're saying, but if you're looking at that brand, you really ought to take a look at a Moomba." And a lot of times they'll look at me like I'm an idiot, and other times we'll walk over and we'll look, and they start realizing, you know what, he's right. The thickness of the cushions, the piping lines up. It's got everything you need in a boat, just without the high price in the fluff. And I think where that falls into place is, a lot of people, again, I talk about the smart buyer, but it's, they've got an opportunity to buy a quality boat without spending, the $250,000, $300,000. Hell, some boats are hitting the $500,000 mark now, but they're not sacrificing anything. And I think people need to see that. Unfortunately, perception is reality, and they still have, it's perceived as it's less money. There's got to be something wrong with it or cheaper with it, and I again, telling stories, but I tell a story of, years ago, I went to Minneapolis to there was an on-water, it was a dealer event. They were doing a Dare to Compare, and I had our customer service manager with me, and I travel a lot, so I've got status, and walk up to the rental car counter, and the lady hands me the keys to a Hyundai, and I hand them right back to her. I said, "No, thank you," and I'm like, and I played the "Do you know who I am" card, and I've got status, blah, blah, blah. And I think she played the "I don't really care, Mr. Crysdale, here's what you're going to drive," and deal with it. And so, I take the keys of this car. Well, my perception in my mind, I have an older brother, and I remember him and his wife bought one of the original Hyundais, and you probably remember it seemed like they were all square and light blue and had an orange or red stripe down the side, and it was the biggest piece of crap, always breaking down. And in my mind, that's what she was handing me the keys to. And I'm walking out there to this car and I'm thinking, who's this email going to, or who's this letter going to? And I'm pissed. And as I walk up, there's this beautiful pearl white car, 4-door, fancy wheels and tires. Get in it. It's beautiful inside. It drives great, plenty of power. Totally changed my mind or perception about who Hyundai was. But had I not gotten in that car, I would have never known that, And so I look at that with the value price boat. There still is the new boater, on the Moomba side, but it's tougher. To your point, it's $100,000 boat. We have 2 models this past year that a couple of our dealers brought in stripped down, and they did what they call like a knockout package, and they were actually able to sell a 22-foot boat for $89,995, and it was a home run. And the 24-foot version was just over 100. We've got a boat called the Craze that we're going to launch a campaign. It's a 22-foot Moomba that we're going to do under $100,000. So we're still trying to hit that market, but it's tough because I challenge our engineers all the time on the low end stuff. Matt Brown is our head Moomba engineer, and we just had this conversation a few weeks ago, and I'm like, hey, can't we even build an 18-foot boat, with put a 4-cylinder motor in it, or just to get people a loss leader, get people into the market. But he broke down the numbers for me, and with the bill of materials, the actual materials, the labor, the cost of the motor, then the trailer, which that particular boat, everybody's going to need a trailer. It's not like that's somebody that owns a lake house or whatever. And so they're going to need a trailer. And it was amazing, where that number was. And it's like, yeah, you can't get there. And then my point to him was, well, can't we just, let's, again, a smaller motor. Well, you can't do that because the smaller motor, there's not that volume. So, you're limited on what you can get. So all of a sudden you think you can get a 2.3 liter EcoBoost turbocharged motor or whatever, but it's going to cost as much as a 6.2 liter Raptor that we're already using because you don't have the volume discounts in there. So it's a tough thing to juggle. I know I'm kind of talking in circles there, but that's the
well, I just like when you look at it, you mentioned a $500,000 boat, and immediately I think of the Paragon, right, from Nautique, and it's just like we have a $500,000 surf boat. We should be able to have some price. Everything right now, every industry, it seems like the value brand is working right now. And so I just think there's a way back to that. But let me ask you something. I mean, towboats and surf boats, they exploded during COVID along with pontoons, and both were very, very fast growing segments. And I don't know, we can talk about what happened on the backside of COVID, but do you think with that growth rate, is there a way back to that adoption rate that we had right during when everybody was going home and staying at their cabins and not going to work and everything like that? Or is that just a one-shot deal and we need to get realistic with our expectations moving forward?
Yeah, my personal opinion is we'll never see that. The whole industry will never see that again. I just think we were very fortunate. I remember when that first started and I thought, oh crap, here comes the recession again, and we had dealers canceling orders, and then it turned around pretty quickly. I think we were shut down for about 4.5 weeks total. And then we were just trying to build what we could. One thing, again, this is where we think differently as a company is, and this is why I don't know that we'll get back to the numbers that we had during COVID as far as us as a manufacturer, but we were already at max production before COVID, and we had maxed out our plant, if you will, just based on size. So during COVID, we made the choice not to go up. We probably could have and figured out a way, but we didn't want to. Again, the focus is quality. We didn't want to sacrifice quality. So I think as a manufacturer, we can get our numbers up, but I don't think we'll ever get back to what those COVID numbers were, and I wish we could. I mean, it's that was good, easy times, but the unfortunate thing that came from that for us as a manufacturer is, we did open up the door to a lot of our competitors. We had dealers that were just selling our product, and when we couldn't supply them more boats, and they were literally selling everything they could or everything they could get their hands on, they picked up other lines, and those lines are still in their stores, and that has an impact on us right now, especially as things slow down. We canceled some dealers or non-renewed with them, some lower performing dealers, to try to help some of our bigger dealers. And, at the time that seemed like the right decision, but now, you kind of question that, going, okay, if we still had those dealers, that helps us get back up there,
Sure.
Yeah. There tends to be an inventory problem with some dealers out there that are still holding on to 23s and 24s. And when I say holding on, it's not like they're doing it intentionally. It's that they can't get the thing sold, right?
Yeah.
And they're paying a tremendous amount of flooring interest on these things. And as you know, boats that are getting that old, the value proposition on that between what you have in it with flooring and what it's worth now can sometimes have that upside down. How do your dealers look as far as having clean inventory, and are you guys participating in any way, shape, or form to help dealers rid themselves of those?
Yeah, so we typically don't. We're not the company that throws a lot of money at deals. If you look at that's one of our value propositions, if you will, or the way our company runs, is that we don't put a lot of fluff in our boats. As you look at our boats, they've got everything and more than most of our competitors, but they're generally less money. And that's just because we don't fluff, so we don't give a lot of money to the dealers other than through boat shows. But probably the past year and a half, we have done it quite a bit. We're running promotions, we're running monthly, quarterly promotions, whatever. We kind of just look at what's going on. We have some make it happen money, if you will, to try to, if there's somebody sitting at the desk wanting to do the deal, they can give us a call and we'll help them out. We track our dealers' inventories very, very closely. We do a monthly report, and then we also do a weekly report with the sales team. So we have a really good idea of who has what, and I'm not going to say we're clean. I think that nobody's clean, but we're in a good spot, I would say. Could we be better? Yes. We have some dealers that I would say are heavy. I believe we don't have any 23s out there. I believe our 24s have dwindled down pretty low. So that's good that they're moving boats, but I'm also not saying our dealers have made a bunch of money selling those boats either. We're fortunate to have we have a really strong dealer network and a really smart dealer network, and most of them have been doing it a while, and I think they've gotten figured out, hey, I'm going to have to get aggressive, and it's better than paying the juice. That's the biggest headache right now is interest payments. That's money you never get back. So they're wanting to move that. We've done a lot of free flooring stuff. We've helped out with that, and especially as we got to the latter part of 2025 model year production, we were given some assistance there. So we're doing what we can to help out. We have a really good sales team. They've all had retail experience. They've all worked at dealerships. They're not afraid to pick up the phone and help a dealer close a deal, call a customer, call their old boat show leads or whatever, and we're pushing our dealers to do everything they can. I was listening to y'all's your latest release this morning on my way to work, and honestly, I almost drove my car into a tree when you.
I know, it hurt, man.
Yeah, it was brutal. But that's reality. But you touched on some things. I know you guys do a great job of just the back to basics. And it's unfortunately we went through the COVID where, everybody became order takers, and
Sure.
You didn't have. You didn't have to lift a finger to sell a boat and make a ton of money, to now, oh crap, I've got to actually, follow up. I mean, that's the biggest thing. And you guys, the marine industry, to y'all's point this morning that I heard is terrible. And it's funny, I bought an RV.
To clarify, horrible at following up on the lead. Right?
Exactly.
They're very good at following up once we sell them a boat. They're not good at chasing it. Okay, Chris, on the heels of you getting heartburn on the podcast, which I think a lot of people got heartburn on that podcast, but you just mentioned to Tony about some of the ways to help some dealers out and find some cash and incentives and stuff like that. But that on that podcast, we talked about some really uncomfortable Q2 data. that so many of the leads come from Q1 boat shows that were followed up with in Q2, but the indecisiveness of what happened in the marine industry in particular. It happened everywhere, right? We launched tariffs. Tariffs are on, tariffs are not. It doesn't matter what your political view is. It caused people to go, whoa, whoa, whoa. I think I'm just going to stop. And they stopped in the best quarter to buy a boat. So here we are. We're down considerably for the year for our marine dealers. It will be impossible for them to make it up in Q4, which I mentioned on that podcast. So relative to making this thing up in Q3 is so critical. Are there anything that you guys can do from the manufacturer standpoint? Or are there anything you're set to do with your dealers, rebates, holdbacks, sales incentives, to help these dealers move through the inventory? Not even to make money, just to get them off the juice, to get them clean through the wintertime.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we're just looking at it monthly and what's needed, and we are in the middle of probably one of the best incentives we've ever done as a manufacturer, and we'll, depending on what sell-through is, we'll continue to do it if needed. We are, our inventory in the field as a total is less than it's ever been in the 11 years that I've been here. Now, that's not just to say they're selling boats. We're also building a lot less boats. So it's not necessarily a sell-through thing, but we're just going to continue to help as needed. We actually just hired a new marketing director. We're going to do some direct marketing with the dealers to try to drive people in. We're hammering the phones with the dealers. Our sales team, like I said, they have retail experience. We're telling them, follow up with every lead. In fact, I was just talking to one of our dealers last week, and they said they have literally contacted every single person they've ever sold a boat to, or every lead they've ever had, and they're just digging deep, back to the basics.
Who is that? What dealer was that?
Our dealer, Southtown Water Sports in Charlotte.
Holy cow!
Yeah.
I'm gonna find it. We're gonna get him on this podcast.
Let's get them on the podcast.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that's and if you're listening to this, contact us info@Garage Composites, because I would love to hear your story.
Yeah. No, it's and I think that's what we have to do. As a manufacturer, we're marketing at the best we can to drive people in. We've gotten real involved with Qualtrics, doing Qualtrics surveys and stuff. We got a person handling that, to where we're trying to get information on how can, there's so many things you can get from that, but one of them is how can we better drive leads into our dealers and make good use of that information. And again, we're touching on earlier, but to your point, it's the follow-up is probably the biggest thing that doesn't happen in our industry. And it's crazy. And I'm one of the worst, like I used to hate to follow up with people when I was selling retail. You call somebody up and ask for Johnny, and they say, well, he's at his kindergarten class today. I don't know where you got that lead from. But you just deal with them and you work through them. But that's, we always reiterate to the dealers, if you're not following up with them, somebody else is, and that's I'm gonna hate myself for saying it, but everybody's building a good boat right now. There's not nobody's building a crappy boat. There's a lot of good boats. There's a lot of good dealers. And, if you think that people are coming to you and they say, yeah, I'm going to come back and buy a boat from you, and you're going to wait for them to come back, they've said that same thing to the other 4 dealers they've stopped in at, or stopped in their booth at the boat show. And it's whoever picks up the phone. And I like to I like to talk to people that I see in a new boat, just to ask them, what made you buy that boat? I don't tell them what I do, and just kind of pick their brain. And one of the majority of the answers I get is because this is the dealer that followed up with me, or they were the first ones to follow up with me. I'm like, well, crap, if it's that easy, why can't everybody do it? So again, we're pulling out everything we can to help our dealers. If a dealer calls us and says, hey, I'm trying to put this deal together, what can I do? I'll say, one of the sales reps will call that customer, and people are impacted by that. When somebody from the factory calls them, it sets a different tone. So we'll do whatever we have to do to try to help out. And I wish there was a blanket way to do it all, but I think it's a case by case. We have some very creative dealers that are doing a good job, and they're doing their own incentives and doing what they can to move products, because again, none of them want to. The juice is about to hit again, curtailments and all, and nobody wants to be paying those.
Hey, Chris, we see this in a lot of the industries that we're in, and I feel like we're pricing young families and future boaters, future motorcyclists out of the market, right? You see it with Harley Davidson losing a sub $10,000 motorcycle entry. You're talking sport bikes now are high 16, 19, 20, $25,000, where, back in the day you could get into that, right? And so do you guys have an answer for that? And do you agree with that statement that, you have a family of 5, it's hard enough to feed these damn families these days. And now we're talking price tags
These
of boats
damn
and side by
families.
side. Feed these damn kids.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
No, it's funny you say that. I agree with you, Hunter. My opinion is yes, that is a huge concern. As a dad who has a 24-year-old that just graduated college and is living in my basement with his fiance, and he's making really good money. He's got a great job, but I feel sorry for him. He's in a pickle because everything's so expensive. And obviously boating has become expensive, but everything is. And I look at him, and he is the perfect person that I would think would be an eventual boater. I just don't know when he's ever going to be able to get there, based on the cost he's going to have to pay for everything else, let alone a toy, to use on the weekends. That's $100,000. And it's a struggle, and it's something we talk about on a regular basis. Again, I mentioned earlier, we challenge our engineers, what can we do? But it's tough. It's just based on the cost of everything. Even you guys mentioned tariffs, and, we budgeted our year, and now all of a sudden we're getting hit with tariff stuff left and right. And some of it doesn't even, honestly, to me, it doesn't make sense. It seems like nobody even understands the tariff stuff. So all of a sudden they just put a tariff charge on it. And when we thought we were, trying to minimize any price increase or be more aggressive, and then boom, you have no choice. And I don't know that we'll ever get to that. We had a product advisory team with our dealers, and we talked about a goal of getting to an $80,000 to $85,000 boat that's got good features on it, and we struggled to even get there, and that's still a lot of money, in the grand scheme of things right now. So I unfortunately, I don't have a good answer. I wish I did, but it's something, again, that we won't give up on. We're going to keep trying to figure something out, but I don't know when we'll get there. I mean, the average, what's the median boat buyer? I was just at MLA a few months ago, and 60 years old, is the average age of the new boat buyer. And you go, holy crap, that's not a good number. It's the highest it's ever been. So we definitely, as an industry, need to figure out a way to get people into boating. There is I think the positive, one of the things from that MLA meeting was, the jet ski industry is doing really well. And, because I think that's really the only affordable way to get on the water in something new. So, I hate to sit back and hope, but, if you sit back and hope that gets them hooked on boating to where, they can eventually, but it might be 10, 15, 20 years, before they can get to where they can afford a new boat. But then what's the price of that new boat then is the other part of it. So, yeah, it's a problem.
Well, the answer is that ProStar 190. If you still have it, kick your son out and give him that boat.
There you go. Exactly.
I just think the answer is pre-owned. It's not going to stop a motorcyclist from getting into motorcycling or a boater from getting into boating. What it's going to do is the manufacturers are shooting themselves in the foot, because that 60-year-old is going to be 62 and 64 and 66. And so when do you want the guy to start buying a new boat in the 60s or in the 30s or 40s, and then get him, 3 or 4 more times along the way? At some point, there's going to have to be some solution. I sit here and think about, like, what was it? The Switch, the BRP Switch, right? All these premium pontoon boats at 100,000. I don't even know if a BRP Switch is a pontoon boat, but it acts like one. It looks like one that I used to make out of Legos back in the day. And there's some young people that be like, we'll go there first, and try it out. So and maybe, go ahead.
I was going to say, that's what we challenge our engineers with all the time. It's like, what can we, think of something, is there something that hasn't been done yet? Is something new, something that nobody's thought of? And it's tough, we've been racking our brain, and I don't know when we'll get there.
We're so used to opulence in those boats, and we're so used to it in our cars now that we buy these days. You mentioned Hyundai. In 1988 Hyundai, we look back on that and be like, look at this thing. But you know what? To the guy that could afford that as a first car, got his first new car.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
It's like Tony back in his Subaru Brat days.
Yeah, man.
But here's Chris, my last question to you. And maybe you just answered the question with your last answer, but the biggest threat to the marine industry, let's assume our guys make it through the winter by having a great Q3. What's the biggest threat in 2026 to the marine industry?
Yeah, so this keeps me up at night. There's a lot, but there's not just one thing, unfortunately. I think, you know, you guys touched on it in the podcast I heard this morning, but and I'm going to lump it all together. But I think it's government. You know, I think there's many things that fall under that, and I'm not anti-government. I don't want to get put on any list. I don't think this is the right podcast for that anyway. But you know, it's to me that's the biggest concern because okay, you take tariffs. You know, obviously that's an impact, but then you know, local governments with bans on, you know, area lakes for, you know, there's just a new report about I think it's Minnesota or Wisconsin, and they're trying to say it's messing up the bottom of the lake. Well, that just doesn't affect wake boats. That's eventually somebody will take that and it'll affect all boating, you know, and so you look at that, there's a lot of misinformation on that. Thank God for, you know, organizations like the WSIA that helps fight those battles. And, you know, a lot of people assume it's just for the towboat industry, but it's really all of boating because you know how anytime there's government stuff, once you know, one person gets regulated, everybody will get regulated. That's tied to that. And I think that's a big fear. And even the, you know, government from the, interest rates, you know, consumer confidence, you might throw that with media, but I think the government has an impact on that. And then there's a lot of local stuff going on, even with Quebec has Bill 96, which is, it's been on the books for years, but now they're starting to implement it to where every manufacturer has to have, if you want to sell product in Quebec, you have to have all your manuals and your advertising and everything has to be in French. I mean, even your app, we have a telematics app. Now we find out that has to be in French. You know, there's a huge cost to that, which, you know, if you make the choice to do that, that just goes right back into the price of the boat, you know, and then that drives the price up even more. So I think government to me is the biggest concern coming up. I think you guys did hit the nail this morning. I was actually going to comment, and then you mentioned it. The weather this year has been, was, I think for us this year, the biggest impact and the reason for, I'm not going to say the only reason for a bad Q2, but one of the biggest things was it was cold and wet and rainy everywhere. I did a trip with one of our new sales reps and we went up through the Northeast and we saw 8 dealers in 4 days. And I said, we're going to do this the week before Memorial Day because it'll give you a chance to meet your dealers, but they won't have time for us because they'll be so busy. You know, we'll just get in and out. You can meet them. It'll work out perfect so we can hit all these dealers in a short amount of time. Every dealer we went to was 40 to 45 degrees, raining, windy. We went to one dealer that they also have a rental fleet of pontoons. They have 90 pontoon boats that are always rented out every weekend because they're in a resort area. They had 0 reservations for Memorial Day weekend, you know, and you just go, okay, that happened. I mean, here in Tennessee, I think it was the second weekend in July before we had a non-rainy, cold weekend. So I think that was our biggest issue this year, along with the tariffs and then the uncertainty. Golly, man, this has been just, you know, the most uncertain I've ever seen the marine industry, probably every industry, because nobody really knows. You know, we assume we're going to get rate drops that might help, but you know, will we? We'll have to wait and see. You know, it's leaning that way, but it's concerning. So there's a lot of hurdles. You know, there's even the COVID trades. I mean, that's, you know, COVID was great for everybody making money, and God bless everybody that made a bunch of money, but now we're all paying for it because, you know, this year at boat shows, it was brutal. I worked, I don't know, a dozen boat shows, and every show there was multiple people wanted to buy a boat, but they couldn't because they were so buried in the boat, whether it was new or used, that they bought during COVID. You know, I was dealing with one family and they had bought a 25-foot Yamaha that they drove, you know, 1,200 miles to get. So, you know, they just got raped when they got there, and they paid way over. They wanted to buy a new Supra. Their payment trying to cover the overage and everything. At the 20-year note was going to be like $2,400 a month. And I usually don't stick around for the money stuff, but I walked away because it kind of made me sick to my stomach thinking, wow, is this where we're really at? But there is a demand out there for people that want to buy boats that just can't because they're so buried in what they bought during COVID because they just wanted a boat and were willing to pay whatever. So
yeah.
Pre-owned.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well,
and the other thing I had that I was going to touch on was the failing dealers. You guys touched on it. I didn't realize that number was that big. I think that's one of my biggest fears is, the dealers that even though they did move inventory, were they making money? And as we get into the fall and winter, are they going to realize, okay, I didn't save the money I normally save, and what am I going to do? So it's just, there's a lot of a lot of things out there, to be a lot of hurdles, if you will, and a lot of things to be concerned about, and we'll just keep pushing through.
Yeah, Chris, we appreciate the time, man, and I know that we are the two guys that are actually holding you back from cracking a beer and getting to your boat. So thank you so much for the time, man, and really good interview.
Thank you, guys. I enjoyed it. Enjoy what you guys do. Appreciate you guys. And look forward to seeing you guys at Dealer Week or wherever it is next time. Yeah.
See you there,
we'll
man.
Be there.
Awesome.
For Chris Crysdale. For Chris Crysdale and Sam Dantzler, I'm Tony Gonzalez. Hope you guys have a fantastic Tuesday, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.